Just for a quick agenda about what we're going to be covering today, obviously, we're going to be talking about standardized testing. So we'll just have a little bit of like an info session covering different things related to standardized testing. And then we'll have a student panel with a Q&A. You guys are also welcome to put questions in the chat as the presentation goes. Sahara will try to answer any that can be answered, and then I can also answer some verbally if necessary. And then we'll have just a quick session about school links for the last like 10 or so minutes. Um, okay, so obviously the big tests that people think about with standardized testing are the SAT and ACT. So that's what we're going to be talking about first. So just a little overview of what standardized tests are. They're basically, the term standardized basically just means that it's like a benchmark exam that is given, that's like ranked nationally. So it's based on how you are compared to other students in the nation. Um, so it is ultimately a skills assessment. So they're made to kind of evaluate the critical skills like reading comprehension, mathematical testing and reasoning, and writing, which are meant to be a way to see how ready you are for college. And so that's why it kind of acts as a college readiness indicator, which is why scores are often weighted pretty heavily in colleges. Um, Now, standardized tests allow students and educators to benchmark academic performance against national and international standards, just as a way. It's basically just another measurement when doing college applications, which is why we wanted to focus on it a little bit today for our first session. So, just a little bit about the landscape of international or of standardized testing. So, obviously, like I mentioned, there is the SAT and ACT, which most of you have probably heard about. So, obviously, these are two exams that are ultimately made to measure the same things that we discussed on the previous slide, but they are different in terms of format and I guess like the types of questions they ask. So that's why it's important to maybe take both or get familiar with both so you know which one would work best for you, which we'll be discussing that a little bit later on. Um, One thing I did want to mention is that in terms of like study schedules, is that it's really important to practice, especially with the SAT and ACT. Those are very based on learning the exam and learning how to answer certain types of questions. So that's like definitely a very important part. And also in kind of like the college application process, tests are being given a little bit less importance, especially after COVID with test optional. Um, so it's also really important to focus on like extracurriculars. So even though like standardized exams are obviously very important and they can definitely help your application, it's not like the final thing that will kind of like get you into university. So a little bit more about test optional because I know that's a new term for a lot of people. So um, most schools nowadays are test optional, especially after COVID. So that basically means that you can choose whether you want to submit your test scores or not. Generally, kind of as a rule of thumb, you should submit your test scores, especially if you're above the school's average exam score, which you can just kind of like look up on their website. However, there are exceptions. So a lot of the times, like averages are increasing due to test optional status because you only have people with super high scores submitting their like test score. But I think it's definitely still really important to submit it just because it shows like even if you're kind of like an average score or you're towards the lower end of their average range, I think it's definitely still a good idea to submit it, especially if you have really good extracurriculars and other activities to kind of shape your application as well. And this is kind of what I was saying earlier. You can use the Common App or look at like the university website to see if they're test optional or not, as well as what their like average exam score range is for both the ACT and the SAT. So a little bit about why standardized tests are important. I know most people do end up taking them, but it is really important just for college admissions criteria. And even if you do decide to go test optional, a lot of the time scholarships can rely on your like score. They'll ask for that. And it can also help a lot with like academic placement when you actually get admitted into college. So like if you have a really good exam score, especially with your AP exams, that can help you get credit for your classes, which we'll be talking about a little bit more later as well. And then it can also help just with preparation for future exams because a lot of those skills will kind of stay consistent between when you take the ACT and SAT and then also future exams, like maybe while you're in college for a graduate program. So now we're going to go into some practice questions. If you kind of just want to put in the chat what you might think the answer is, it's no pressure, like if you're right or wrong, and we'll kind of go through them. And we'll talk a little bit more specifically after these questions about the ACT versus the SAT, and you might start to notice a trend a little bit with some of these practice questions. So this is the first question. We have one, two, and three here. So if everyone wants to take a shot at number one first and put their answer in the chat, maybe we'll give you like a minute to do that, and then we can go over it. So if you guys want to go ahead and put your answer, what you think the right answer might be in the chat, feel free for number one. Okay. So we can just go through what number one is. So the correct answer is going to be D, which is to omit the underline portion. A lot of the times on the ACT, this will be an answer choice in like the first section, which is like the English section. So the just like a little explanation of that. The other choices insert something called subordinating conjunction. So like as, while, and when, which just kind of creates a segment or a sentence fragment. So you really don't need anything here. You can kind of just like if you do decide to omit it and you read the sentence, so it would read in 1916, the Democratic Party's National Convention met in St. Louis, Missouri to nominate candidates for the presidency and vice presidency and to establish a platform and so on until the sentence ends. So you can see in this case, you don't need the as there because the rest of the sentence is just happening in 1916, which is the beginning of the sentence. And then if everyone also wants to try number two and put their answer in the chat. Okay. So now to go over number two, the correct answer is E, which is no change. This is also a common answer you'll see in these sections. So the no change and the omit are the most common ones that you'll see. So it's definitely good to get familiar with like when you need to do that. So just to go through this, since it says like to nominate candidates for the presidency and vice presidency, you would want to keep two just to make sure that the sentence reads properly. Because if you take that out, it wouldn't really specify what you're nominating for. And then if everyone wants to try number three, and then we'll move on. Okay, so for number three, the correct answer is going to be D, which is suffragists. So for this, you don't really need a transitional word. If you read the sentence before, it kind of just explains what the National Convention is and the purpose of it. So the fact that the next sentence is kind of just talking about who suffragists are, that you don't really need like a transition sentence or a transition word between the two, like therefore. And then one more quick thing I just want to know about the ACT English section is that this is more of like a formatting thing, and I think most people kind of understood it based on what they read in the or based on the answers in the chat, but the questions, so like one is going to be underlined by number one, but that's not to be confused by like the paragraph numbers. So just that's like another thing to keep in mind. Okay, and now we're gonna do the same thing, but kind of for the SAT. So the SAT has a combined reading and writing section. So it is aimed to kind of test the same things, but you'll see here that the format and style of questions are a little bit different. So if everyone wants to put their answer in the chat for number one, okay. And the correct answer for number one is going to be B. Um, So we'll see here. B says speculates. So if we read that sentence, we'll say the former astronaut Ellen says that although she doesn't have a definite idea of when it might happen, she speculates, which means she kind of like thinks or based on like an educated guess, that's what she thinks, that humans will need to be able to live in other environments than those found on the Earth. So I saw a lot of people, I believe, also put D. So just to go through that super quick. Um, so the reason D would be incorrect in this scenario is just because the first part of the sentence says that Ellen does not have a definite idea of when it might happen, and establishes is a very like strong word that's gonna say like, oh, it's definitely gonna happen at this point, which is why that would not be the correct answer choice there. Then if everyone wants to try two and put their answer in the chat for that. Okay, perfect. So the correct answer for this is going to be C. So I think everyone who put their answer picked C, but we'll just go through it super quickly. So C says persistent. So the reason this is going to be correct is because the first sentence before the semicolon in this says continuously worked. So it's like she's being very persistent. And that's why that's going to be the choice there. Okay, and now for some ACT math questions. If everyone wants to try number one and put their answer in for that. Okay, so now for number one, the correct answer here is going to be 101. So you'll see if you divide the total number of miles, which is 2,727, by the 27 miles per gallon, you get 101. And then you're going to want to multiply that by the cost per gallon, which is going to get you 408.04, which is the total cost. And then if everyone wants to try number two, and super quick before we go through this question, I saw someone had a question in the chat about the calculator. Like if you have a calculator on the exam. So for the ACT, you still have the no calculator and calculator section. And then the SAT remain the same as well. Okay, and then to go through number two, the correct answer is going to be D. And here's the explanation here. If you substitute 150 in the expression, you're gonna get the value of 1,250. Okay, and then this is number seven here, but it's the third question. If everyone wants to take a shot at that. Okay, and the correct answer for this is going to be 14. This is another kind of like substitution related question. So if you substitute the values in, you're gonna get 14 for your answer. And here's just a little explanation about it as well. And then if everyone wants to try the last question. Okay, so for this, the correct answer, which I think most people got, is going to be L equals 2W minus 3. So it's going to be answer choice J. Okay. And another note I just want to make on the math section of the ACT, the way that it's structured is that it's like it gets progressively harder throughout the section. So it's the only section of the exam that does that. So it's just something to keep in mind, especially when you're thinking about like time allotment, that you might want to save a little bit more questions for the questions at the, or a little bit more time for the questions at the end. Okay, and then we just have two SAT math questions to practice. If everyone wants to try number one. Okay, perfect. It looks like most people got A for their answer, which is going to be correct. So it's basically just a proportion of the amount of dollars and the amount of hours worked. And then if everyone also wants to try number three and put their answer in the chat. Okay, perfect. Looks like most people are getting B, which is also going to be the correct answer. So good job with those. You're basically just adding the systems of equations together to get what y equals. Okay, so those are some um like really quick questions for both the ACT and the SAT. And now I'll just kind of be going more into like the actual structure of the exams, but I thought that would just be kind of an interactive thing to include before we get started. So for some similarities between exams, both of like the purposes and recognition, I guess, of them is similar. So they're obviously both standardized tests, which we kind of saw in the practice questions, and they're used for college admission purposes. And I think a common like misconception a lot of people have in terms of recognition is that some schools like prefer the SAT while some prefer the ACT. Um, so now, at least in the current like college admission landscape, that isn't really the case. It's more just whatever exam works better for you. So you really don't need to kind of tailor what exam you're taking to what schools you're planning on applying to. They're both obviously college indicators, which we kind of talked about earlier. So that basically the higher the score, obviously the better, and they have an equivalence factor. So if someone's like more used to taking the ACT, you can compare your SAT score to the ACT as well. Just so everything's standardized. They're also pretty much take the same overall skills. So we just saw they both have like the reading section, they both have writing and math. So they all kind of evaluate the same kind of critical thinking skills and similar like concepts. But you can see the style of them is a little bit different. And then they're also both used in scholarship decisions quite often. So a lot of the times for certain scholarships, you'll have to submit your score, and that can be another indicator. So now for a little overview of the ACT. So the total duration for the ACT is that it's 2 hours and 55 minutes, and then You can take the writing section as well, which is optional, and then that will add an additional 40 minutes. And it is online, along with the SAT. So in terms of the sections that it has on the exam, it has an English section, a math section, a reading section, and a science section. And you'll see, even though obviously like all the tests are different, they have a similar format and like types of questions that you're given. So for English, for example, you'll always be evaluated on grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, and rhetorical skills. In math, you'll kind of see the same subjects on every ACT exam you take. For reading, you have the same thing where you're evaluated a lot on like reading comprehension. You'll see that there's certain types of passages that are on every single ACT exam. So like all ACTs, for example, have more of like a historical passage as well as like a modern passage. And then in the science section, you'll have one of each of these four types of pair passages to read. So in terms of scoring, the ACT is scored from score 1 to 36. And then you have each section that's scored that way, and then the composite score is the average of the four sections. And it's usually offered about 7 times per year. Um, and then now for an overview of the SAT. So the SAT has a little bit different in terms of like the sections that it has, but again, it's similar skills that it's testing. So it has the evidence-based reading and writing, which again, the reading is going to kind of evaluate similar skills. So like reading comprehension, vocabulary, it's going to probably have more of like a historical style passage. The writing and language section is also going to evaluate similar skills like grammar, punctuation, and sentence structure. And then the math section, which there's a calculator and non-calculator section, is going to similarly evaluate similar subjects. So like algebra, math, or about algebra, trig, geometry, subjects like that. And then for the time allotment, there's a little graph here that kind of shows how much time you get for each. And now since the exam is online, they they have like these split modules. So for reading and writing, it's total 64 minutes, but each like reading will be 32 minutes and writing will be 32 minutes. And then for math, it's going to be two 35-minute modules, one with calculator and one without. So for the scoring of the SAT, it's scored from 400 to 1600. And so math is scored out of 800, and then the reading and writing is scored out of 800. And then your total score is the sum of the two sections, and it's usually offered about 5 to 7 times a year, depending on where you live. So for some key differences between the exams, so I think this is really helpful to kind of decide which exam should I take, because I think it can be really hard to decide that. So first for the ACT, you have a science section, which the SAT does not have. And this is going to be direct questions from passages, like science related passages that it's going to ask you. So it is a little bit more of like reading. It's not necessarily like your science knowledge, but it's more of like your ability to extract science knowledge from these science related passages. Um, and then I'll just super quickly answer this question in the chat about the writing section that we talked to a little bit earlier. Um, Personally, I don't think the writing section has as much weight as it did before. So if you're looking at like a specific school, it might say on their like application website whether they want you to take writing or not. I would say most schools don't want you to, or don't like have a preference either way. So if it's something that you maybe want to take once with your ACT or SAT, then that might be a good idea. But usually you don't need to take it every time you take the ACT or SAT. Okay, so sorry, going back to the key differences, the ACT is also going to be a faster pace and a little bit more intense in terms of the time you're given. So you're going to have, on average, less time per question. For the SAT, you're going to have more time per question, but usually the questions are a little bit more difficult because you're given that extra time. Personally, I know for myself, like I took both the ACT and SAT, but I ended up going with the SAT because I feel like I don't really like being under a time crunch like that. So it just depends on what works better for you. And you can obviously try both and figure that out. So along with that, the SAT focuses more on like logic and problem solving because you are given that extra time to kind of work through those problems a little bit more. And then the other big thing with the SAT in terms of college applications is that the SAT usually allows for a super score. So what that means is if you basically like let's say you take the SAT like 2 times before you apply to college, and on your first time you get like a 700 in math, um, and you get like a 600 in the English section, and then you retake it and your scores kind of like swap. So you get a 600 in math and a 700 in the reading section. A lot of schools will allow you to super score, which means they take the highest of all your attempts, and then that will be your final score. So your super score on the SAT when you apply to colleges would be 700 for the math, which was your highest math score, as well as 700 for your reading and writing, which was your highest score for that section. Versus like on either attempt, you got 1300. So that is helpful. A lot of the times, if you do end up taking it more than once, the ACT a lot of the times you're not able to super score just because the way that the ACT is scored is it's already an average of your sections rather than a sum. So because of that reason, a lot of the times colleges don't let you super score the ACT. So that's another key difference that is definitely very important to consider. And then just a little kind of statistic, the SAT usually provides on average 68% more time per question compared to the ACT. So as you can see, it's definitely a lot more time, but again, the questions are going to be a little bit trickier. So kind of going off of that, when you want to decide between the ACT and the SAT, I definitely recommend kind of taking both at least like through a practice exam, even if it's not like an officially proctored exam, just because I think it, even if you think you know your strengths, it can definitely still be helpful to know, like, to actually like sit down and take the exam and see which one you score better on. I feel like a lot of the times, especially if you take higher level classes anyways, the SAT is often not as hard for people because you're already used to those higher level questions, but now you have more time per question. So that's also another thing that I think is important to consider. Um, and again, with the ACT, the biggest difference is that you don't have much time per question, which I think is the big deciding factor for a lot of people when they think about which exam they want to take. So now to get into some effective test prep strategies. So the first thing is to really familiarize yourself with the test format. I think this is a good thing to do even before when you're deciding if you should take the SAT and ACT. You can just like look up on the College Board website and the ACT website to see the respective test format, which we kind of went through earlier. Obviously, practice test is really important, especially like to get the kinds of questions that you'll be seeing. Um, and another thing is that it's really important to kind of look at practice tests in more recent years, especially because both the ACT and the SAT have gone online recently. So that's also something that we like, you kind of do want to focus on exams that are more recent to the time that you're taking it, just so the format is going to be similar. And then obviously for timing purposes as well. There are tutoring and prep courses available. And then there's also the PSAT that can often act as a little bit of a prep test for the SAT. Most schools also offer school administered exams, which are helpful practice resources. I think it's really helpful to also create a study plan and schedule. So, depending on when you want to register, either on College Board for the SAT or for on ACT.org for the ACT, it's really helpful to kind of think about based on your test date, like when you need to start practicing, how much content you know, and think about like when you should space out your practice exams to take them. Another resource is Khan Academy. It's the official SAT partner, so it's going to have a lot of free questions that are kind of like approved by SAT, so you know that it's going to be the same types of questions that you're going to be asked on the real exam. So a little bit more on the PSAT. This is really a good SAT practice test because it's going to be similar style questions, but of more of like a low stakes and a little bit of a different format, but definitely really good practice. So a little bit more about the PSAT. Colleges offer scholarships, sometimes even free tuition to national merit finalists. So a lot of the times, based on like what school you go to, you'll have the PSAT offered in ninth and 10th grade, which is the grade most of you all are in. So it's a really good resource to take it during those years if you're allowed. And then in 11th grade, you'll be actually taking the PSAT to qualify for national merit. So if you get a certain score based on whatever state you live in, like each state will have a different cutoff, which can just be looked up online. If you look up like PSAT national merit score, you can kind of see what you need to get. And then based off of that, you can become a national merit semifinalist, and then you'll have an application to become a finalist. Another thing with the PSAT is that if you do become a finalist and you do score high enough, you're not only getting scholarships from schools, but also from many companies. And then also the fact that you did well on the PSAT can also help you prepare really well for the SAT. Okay, so now getting into AP exams a little bit. For an overview, these are basically college level exams that people generally take after taking that course. And they're basically made just to show proficiency in that subject. So unlike the SAT and ACT, these are going to be these are going to be focused on a specific subject, and there's a very wide subject range of different exams you can take. These are scored from 1 to 5, 1 to 2 showing that you are not proficient, and then 3 to 5 showing that you are passing. Um, and then these are standardized exams for all US students that take it. So a little bit about the importance of AP exams, which I feel like a lot of people, especially early in high school, like in ninth and 10th grade, they might not be aware of. So a lot of the times when you take these AP exams, you can get college credit. A lot of the times you have to have a passing score, so a 3 to a 5. For some schools, you're required to have a 4 or a 5, which demonstrates excellence, to get that college credit. But even like regardless of your score, the fact that you've taken exams is still helpful in the college admissions process because it can show the academic rigor in terms of the courses you've taken. And you also get AP designations based on the number of exams you take and the scores you get on those exams, um, which can also be shown to colleges. And then it obviously helps with just like developing your skills, especially as a way to prepare for college. Another thing that's really nice about AP exams is that you can get college credit for it, but it doesn't affect your GPA. So, for example, if you take like an AP science class and you get a 5 on the exam, you can get college credit for that. But even if you didn't get like an A in the class, you're still going to get college credit, but it's not going to affect your GPA in college, which is really nice. Another thing that I did want to mention is that a lot of the times people focus on taking like the AP science classes because maybe they're going to be like pre-health in college, so they really want to take AP biology. And while that's still obviously very good because you're going to get a better understanding of what like you're learning, it's also really important to still consider taking like AP government, AP macro, AP environment, classes like that maybe aren't directly science related because a lot of the times colleges have like distribution requirements. So like everyone is required to take an economics class in college, just like regardless of what they're studying. So those can be really helpful to get kind of get out of those classes and get credit for them. So now we're going to be moving into our student panel, which Sahara is going to be leading a little bit more. So Sahara, I'll let you kind of get started on that.
Yes, for sure. So, really quickly before we do go into the student panel, we did want to share one resource specifically for AP exams that would be really helpful to use. So, I'll go ahead and drop the link in the chat as well as share my screen um, so you can see. So, as Alicia mentioned, a lot of you will be taking AP classes anyways in throughout high school. So we really recommend going ahead and signing up for that AP exam. As like she mentioned, there are a lot of benefits, mainly getting college credit. So on this website, College Board has done a really good job at making it very easy to understand and digest. So if you click over here, you can see which AP courses will match the discipline that maybe you plan on going into. So you can see they have divided all of these disciplines here and listed the AP courses that kind of align with that career choice. Another thing that I personally found super beneficial and I wish I had when I was in high school was that you can check to see which courses could earn you college credit. So if you click on more details here, what you can do is either search by the course or by the college itself. So say maybe you're interested in going on the pre-med track, so you were planning on taking AP biology. So you can go ahead and search by that course and see what the college's name is, where it's located, and the minimum score required to get credit for that course. So you can see it's listed in alphabetical order. There are going to be quite a lot of courses. So that's super helpful. Another way you can sort is by sorting by college. So say, for example, Alicia goes to the University of Michigan and say that's my dream school. So I can go ahead and search by the university itself. And I can see exactly which course this is talking about, the minimum score required to get credit at the specific university, which is Michigan, the number of credits I will receive, as well as the equivalent course for the University of Michigan. So you can see these are all the courses that they accept. And of course, you can play around with this website and look through different courses and colleges. So we really recommend utilizing this. And I will be sharing this in our post workshop email. So no worries if you weren't able to get that link right now. But if Alicia, you want to go ahead and share your screen again, we can move forward with the panel. Okay, I will actually be going ahead and sharing my screen, I guess. Okay. All right, so we're really lucky and excited to have some students who were not too long ago in your shoes in 9th and 10th grade. So we'll just have them all give a quick introduction and tell us about their hometown, their college major and extracurriculars, as well as what they're up to now. So if we want to go ahead and start, and you can unmute yourself so you can go ahead and start speaking.
Hi, everyone. Good luck with all this process, but my name is Reza Shamji. I'm currently in my last year at Harvard. I'm from Los Angeles, and I took both the SAT and ACT and submitted both. So any questions about that, please reach out. I'll also provide my contact information at the end, so please be open to reach out and ask questions you wouldn't feel comfortable asking on here as well.
Awesome. Okay, thank you, Reza. So now moving on.
Hello, my name is Shamal Basaria. I went to Vanderbilt University where I just graduated in December, a bit early. I now work at the United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, where I work on the flu vaccines. And I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I took the ACT, I took also SAT subject tests, which I don't think are required anymore, but I also took 14 AP exams as well. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions via this or via email.
Awesome, thank you. And our last speaker.
Hey everyone, my name is Shayar Lakhani. I graduated a while back. I went to UT Austin, so hook 'em. I'm from Plano, Texas. I'm actually Sahar's brother. And I took the SAT. I've taken AP exams and IB exams. I'll also be happy to provide my information after. So if you have any questions on any of those, let me know.
All right, awesome. So thank you so much for joining us, y'all. So we have a couple of different questions we wanted to get your insight on. So, specifically regarding standardized testing, I know you kind of mentioned which tests you took, but if you could explain a little bit about why you took those exams, kind of what was your process in figuring out which one worked better for you, when you started studying for these exams, and what were kind of your top strategies or resources you utilized to find success. And you can go in the same order if someone is more,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I also didn't add, but I also took AP exams. But for the SAT and or ACT specifically, it was a different process for me than studying AP exams, but I didn't do it the best way. I studied for them pretty late. I didn't do enough prep, but I basically started studying for the ACT and SAT pretty late in the game, really my senior year, but I would never say to do that. The SAT subject tests were also a thing when I was applying to college, so a lot of my time in my summer before my senior year was spent teaching myself a lot of information from that to try and get my best score on those. But the best resources I used is 100% nothing other than the tests, practice tests from past years, and actually hammering it in. I think most important about resources, right? Like these calls could not be helpful if it's not tangible, but each week, starting whenever you want to start, I'd say you guys are freshmen and sophomores, but even starting right away as at the end of your sophomore year and just doing one section every 3 days and then every month doing one test, or as a junior once every 2 weeks doing one test, and actually hammering them out, then you're going to get the best practice. So that's the best way, because no matter what prep books you do, no matter what studying you do, it's the best way is to go to past study materials. In addition, make sure when you go through these type of study materials, you don't just score yourself. You go back and you look at each of the questions you got wrong and understand why every single answer choice A through D, A through E is incorrect, and understand why the correct answer choice is correct, because without going back, you're never going to get better at your tests. And for resources, I used like a little bit of the College Board or the Princeton Review books, but really what it was again were the past tests.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and really to bounce off of Riza, I think that these exams, they're not a measure of your intelligence, they're just a measure of how well you can take a test. And I think the only way to really improve is just to keep doing practice tests. So how I went about it, I didn't take both, I took the ACT. I took a practice test in both and realized which exam was I performing better on, like at baseline, and which one I personally preferred. For me, I'm more of a STEM person, so I enjoyed the science and the math sections on the ACT. So I decided to go with that. I really started to prepare like late October, I believe, in my junior year, and I took it in like early December. So I had like roughly a month and a half to 2 months to prepare for the exam. I also did most practice tests. So how I did that was if you go on Reddit and you search up official practice tests from ACT, you'll find a website that has recent practice tests that were actually administered for the ACT on some websites where people upload them as repositories. And what I would do, I was just going to print them out and just take them section by section. After school on certain days, on weekends, I would do like 2, 3 per day, but on weekdays, I would just do like one exam section per day. And for the ACT, I also used the official Kaplan like thing that they had because I got that for free as a fee waiver. So if you do qualify for fee waiver, whether you take the SAT or the ACT, they do provide you additional benefits for that. So please do take advantage of those if you qualify. So for me, I used that practice bundle just to do a little bit more prep for English. And so with those, I was able to, just with that resource alone and the practice test that I found online for free, I was able to prepare.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think y'all both like hammered it on the head. I only took the SAT, and I think honestly the reason I didn't take the ACT was I feel like, I mean, in high school we took the PSAT for national merit, and I feel like just the SAT was more common. Maybe it would have been a good idea to like practice both and see which one I liked better and then take that one. But yeah, I just took the SAT. I think the only way really to I mean, the best way, as Riza stated, was just to take practice tests. There's not really a way around it. What I remember doing is I would, lock myself in my study and pretend like I'm taking the actual test. So I'd make sure I'm timing it. I'd make sure like same type of environment, and trying to get as close to the actual SAT as possible. And then I would go through each question, I would grade it, and then figure out why I got what I did wrong, and then try to fix that for the next time. So yeah, just like practice test after practice tests. I know Khan Academy has like, I want to say like 5 free practice tests, maybe even more now. A few of my friends had gone to, there's like a SAT tutoring facility in Dallas. So I had some of their old books and I used to use those. You could check things out at the library. There's so many like YouTube videos. So there's an abundance of material, and just like taking practice tests is the best way to prepare.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go ahead and pitch in a little bit about my experience as well. So I also took both the SAT and ACT and kind of found which one worked better for me. A lot of people you'll see use their own or go out and search for their own resources, which, as mentioned, are available. I personally needed a little bit more structure and kind of discipline in practicing for these exams, so I opted to attend a college prep, which, if it is an option, I definitely recommend looking into it and seeing if that could be a good fit for you. So, as one of the panelists mentioned, I do believe you kind of learn how well, or you kind of learn how to take a test, not necessarily how intelligent or smart you are. So, by practicing in an environment that is very similar to the actual exam, you can kind of not be as intimidated when you actually do take the exam. But yeah, so if you want to look into college preps that are in your area, or utilize Khan Academy, which, as mentioned, is free and is the official partner for College Board, I would definitely recommend to do that. Another thing I just really want to pinpoint, which I think Riza mentioned, about being kind of like at this early stage in 9th and 10th grade, I think this is a great time for y'all to start studying, especially for the. Sorry? Okay. So for the PSAT, as that will be taken in 11th grade, so y'all are at a great stage right now to kind of prep for that, because I do think that is not as utilized as it could be, and you can get a lot of scholarships and such out of that. So just overall, just go ahead and try to start early and practice while you can. All right, moving on to the next question. So how did y'all balance both studying for these exams with school, work, or other extracurriculars you were a part of?
I think for me it was a bit more difficult. I think that especially my senior fall, and knowing that my summer before senior year I had to really look at the subject test because I didn't have the best scores for that. I did not manage my time well with the schoolwork and activities. A lot of my time was on school and extracurriculars. So uh, I guess what I would have done if I did it better is 100% be diligent. Just like going to the gym, you have to do 2 a week. You have to go do one practice test every 2 weeks. Because if you don't create a schedule, you're never going to end up doing it, because you always think you have time and there's multiple tests. So you think you'll have time and push and it'll never work out. So balance, honestly, to balance this, you're going to have to add it as another aspect of your job, of your school life. It's another homework assignment. It's another, whatever you can do to think about it as necessary, make sure you do it. I just want to add on to my last question, because this was about SAT, ACT, but regarding AP exams, I think you should treat it just like studying for a final exam for those classes, but starting even a bit earlier, about like this, with regimen, studying each week a bit more than you would have for a final exam, and a bit earlier. So I don't think it's that different than studying for an exam like that.
Awesome.
So how I managed it was, I am someone who likes to schedule and plan things out well in advance. And so I would come up with like weekly or monthly plans for myself to be able to do this certain section on a certain day, or focus on this subject on another day. And so I would usually take these prep, and like I said, my prep work for the ACT was mainly just doing practice tests over and over again, like different ones. And so these were all the free ones that I found online. So I would just have them printed out. I would just time myself, go through one section, I would look over what I got right, what I got wrong, and sort of logically think about why did I get things wrong or why did I even get things right? Like, what was I thinking? Because these exams are really just getting used to the question styles that they ask. And so the more you get exposed to it and the more you push yourself to realize what kind of way are they asking you, there's only a limited number of ways that they'll ask you certain topics, whether they be different types of topics. Um, so once you sort of realize those patterns, it'll really help you in the exams. And so I was just doing it after school, like for 30 minutes to an hour each day. And then on weekends, I would spend a few more hours doing it. And yeah, that's sort of how I balanced myself.
I think, yeah, it's hard to stay consistent. And there's gonna be some times where you're like, in the zone, super productive, and other times it's where you just have to push yourself to do a little bit. But yeah, I think it's important to, try to stay as consistent as possible. A lot of times I feel like this was more effective for me in high school, but I would wake up early and do my work before school, because there's like no distractions then, no one's on Instagram, no one's on TikTok, all of that. So I think a lot of times I found it more productive to wake up early and get a lot of practice done before school. And then also just like don't overwork yourself. I tried to work hard, play hard. I still try to do that. So I would have my fun time. I would go, play sports, play basketball. But I would try to limit that or I would try to do all of the fun stuff after I've gotten my work done. Because it's a lot harder to go, from fun stuff to doing work rather than it is the other way. So I would just make sure I got I would make sure to like keep a balance. Um, Sometimes it gets tough. As I said, there's like some cycles where, you got a lot of exams coming up and maybe you can't study as much for the SAT or AP exams then. But then in the cycles where you are free and have extra time, try to, recoup some of that time to study for those exams.
Awesome. So those are all really great points made by all of y'all. And kind of last question to wrap up. What are some things you wish you knew when you were in ninth or 10th grade? And this can be about standardized testing or just a general kind of piece of advice you would like to give.
I think that at the end of the day, regarding college applications or shooting your shot at the schools that you want, you should always, first of all, think that you are able to get into these schools, because if you don't, there's no point in even trying. So have the confidence that you want to try if you want to shoot your shot. Number two is regarding college application essays, they don't have to be a trauma story or that you saved someone's life. It really is something that has to be just authentic. If it is something like me, I wrote about how much I love crazy socks or my love for sushi, or I wrote about being a smiley in my personal statement. That was what my whole thing was. And I really believe that after reading my essays, I was proud of them, because if someone was to pick up my essays, the best piece of advice I got was, if your essay was in a group of 100 essays without names, would your best friend be able to read all of them and know which one is yours? That's the answer. That's how you should write your essays, in my opinion. And I believe no matter what, at the end of the day, your GPA, your grades, whatever it is, that's now at your stage. Of course, you should work hard to do it. But when you're applying, it is what it is. And you should really put your best foot forward by killing the interview, killing the essays. And by killing the interview, it's by researching the interview, researching the school to a fault so that you really understand your favorite things about it and showing people that you took the time. And honestly, just knowing that you're supposed to go where you're supposed to go, whatever happens, happens, and everywhere is great. There's no difference between X school or Y school once you're there. And make sure that you just try your best, especially at ninth and 10th grade. Go for extracurriculars that you're interested in and stick to them. Or if you're the person to try 100 things, try 100 things. If you're the person that wants to do AP exams or not, make sure that you do push yourself. If you're not ready to push yourself, try. Because I really believe pushing yourself academically is a necessity to be at the best schools. So take those APs you don't want to take, and that's something that's just the harsh truth. So really, overall, work hard, try to shoot for those hard APs, as many as you want to take, and can still balance your life, but push yourself to the point where you're a bit uncomfortable. Number two is try to shoot your shot at any school you really want to try at and make sure your essays are authentic rather than extravagant. And with the interviews, make sure you look up, if once you get interviews for colleges, look up your interviewer and make sure you research super diligently about the college to make sure you could stand out about what you love for the school. And lastly, just try your best. That's really it.
Thank you.
Advice I would give to 9th and 10th graders is choose your extracurriculars based on your interests, because those would appear genuine, and you'll commit to them fully, because since you're starting off now, and for 9th graders and for 10th graders, it's been 1 year. Now is the time for you to fully dedicate to what interests you the most and to do lots of work in that or whatever you prefer. And that eventually will be reflected on your college applications, but also in your personal growth over these 4 years before you enter college. And I think that choosing your extracurriculars based on your interests rather than what you think would appear nice on a college application will go much more further than trying to go after all the competitions or all the prestigious prizes. And I also think that time management is an essential skill. Even when I'm in university at Vanderbilt, I saw a lot of people around me came from all over the world. They had very different experiences in terms of time management. Some never learned the skill in high school. Some did in high school and they performed very well in college and found the transition very smooth. So I would say challenge yourself in high school. Challenge yourself because it will push you academically, and then it'll also lead you to develop all of these different skills that you may not even think of, like time management, which would be very, very helpful when you're in college. I personally can attest that me taking many APs in high school made me feel college was easier. I was able to graduate earlier, and I really am where I am because of it, I think. So definitely take as many APs as you can. Push yourself academically in high school, and all these skills and doing all of this, trying to keep your grades up, doing extracurriculars. Through all of this, you will learn time management to a way that it works for you, and that it doesn't feel as stressful. So I think that that's some advice I would give to you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Shama.
Yeah, and just echoing what both of them said, and additionally, specifically, like not giving up the extracurriculars that you're interested in. For example, I know that I really wanted to take like AP art, or like I wanted to take art in high school, but there was another class that was AP, so it was like a higher GPA boost, and I stopped taking art and took that instead. And I would say don't do that. Definitely take classes or extracurriculars that you're interested in, and don't just focus on the GPA number. Like obviously try your hardest in all your classes, but I promise you, like once you get into college, once you pass that, like you're not even going to remember what your GPA was. So don't just chase the number, chase what you're actually interested in. That's probably the best advice I could give you.
Thank you for the advice, sir.
All right. Thank you so much. Now we're going to go ahead and open to any questions that anyone has, whether they're for the panelists or just in general. So.
I also think someone had a raised hand if you want to unmute and ask your question as well.
Yes,
I know we also, yeah, I was also gonna say for the panelists, if you want to talk a little bit more about like the IB curriculum, I personally didn't take IB, so I'm not like too familiar with it, but if any of you took it and want to talk a little bit more about how that works.
Sure, yeah, I could speak about that a bit. I took the IB, or I did the IB program, and I got my IB diploma. I think honestly, the thing that IB helped me with a lot was just, it was more rigorous than, I don't want to say it's more rigorous than AP, but it's not. It gives you a different type of view on other subjects. Like the goal is to think from more of a global perspective. But there are like, you know, IB exams are very different from AP exams, and it's kind of a different curriculum. I think the thing that it helped me with most was it made me a more competitive applicant, because everyone that was doing IB around me was they're like very driven, and like, you know, they would try really hard, they would study a lot. So I think it just forced me, because I was in that environment, to be more serious about my academics. So that's the way that it helped me a lot. There's also a lot of additional like requirements in addition to AP that you do in IB, so that like forced me to be better at managing my time. Um, yeah, and I like the IB exams more than the AP exams as well. Like it's a lot more writing based. But it like makes you, rather than just knowing the answer for a multiple choice, or you know, memorizing, it's more like asking you to explain it, so it makes sure you fully understand why you're giving the answer that you're giving. But yeah, that's like the main way it helped me. That doesn't mean everyone should do IB. That doesn't mean everyone should do IB. I think AP is very rigorous as well. But yeah, that's just my take on it.
Okay,
Hi
and then
there.
also
I have a
another
question
IB
here.
question.
Hey, hi there. I got a question. I'm so sorry. I just joined very late. I'm right now in London, but we have moved to US, and I'm quite new to the system. My son is in 8th grade. And my yes, as the discussion is going on related to IB schools, I'm also very much interested for my son, but I am finding it hard in California to find nearby location the IB schools. So I just wonder, and also it's like someone did mention about AP exam as well. So I wonder, IB exams are not something like, if, even though if you are studying in the public school and still you can give IB test. Am I correct? Because you have to join the IB school, which the school that has got a IB board, international board, for the testing. Am I correct? So
Yeah,
like, yeah.
yeah.
So
Go ahead.
so in that case, like, I got to find the school that has got a IB board, IB testing examinations. Am I? And for that, I don't know how I would need help. Any suggestions how to find the schools in California? IB schools for particularly?
I can answer that. I don't know if Reza or Shamla, if y'all did IB, but honestly, like for finding the IB schools, I'm not sure location wise. Like it's probably like you'd have to search on Google or word of mouth, but there's probably
Yeah.
a lot of schools now that offer it, at least more than previously. I think where IB comes in more handy is especially if you're applying to schools like outside of the US. You do get credit for IB exams within the US as well, but it depends on the school. So just like some schools give you credit for, you know, different AP exams and different score, it's the same process for IB exams. So you can look up, hey, I got, you know, a 6 on my IB exam, what does that give me? Or like what credits does that give me for UT or Vanderbilt or Harvard, right? But I would say if you're in an area in California and the nearest IB school is like an hour and a half away, I don't think like I wouldn't basically base my move on just going to an IB school. Like it's helpful, but it once again depends on what your goals are. If you know that you want to go to a school outside of the US, then yeah, maybe it's more important. But I don't think just because you do IB, you're like automatically more competitive.
And just to add on to that, IB and AP essentially would give you the same credits in college. It's just a matter of what your school offers. So many schools in the US, I think, have shifted away from the IB program. There's a lot less than there were many years ago. So they've like as a whole, the trend is now that most schools are doing AP curriculum instead. And so doing IB versus AP, it does not matter. It's just the number of courses you take and how well you do in them, because they would eventually give you the same credits in college.
I think another thing to add on to that, I'm like from Iowa originally, so none of the schools in Iowa have like IB or like offer that, but we do have like AP, which is what I took. But now that I'm at Michigan, like a lot of my friends have taken IB, and I think like from kind of what I've gathered, like the way that the college application works is that they will like the admissions board will also look at like what your school offers and what you took based on like what's offered at your school. So like for example, at my school, if like 20 AP classes are offered and I took like all 20 of them, versus like someone whose school only offers like 6 AP classes, like just because that person took less, that doesn't necessarily like put them at a disadvantage just because they like took everything that they could. So like I think a lot of the times, that's another like misconception. So just understanding that like colleges also look at what you took advantage of, I guess, in your school.
And I just wanted to address one question in the chat about taking IB and what does it hinder or accept, like if your school doesn't offer IB program, does it hinder chances at T20 schools? So for me personally, I went to a public school that's top 10 in the US, like in the entire country. Our school only offered AP exams, and I did make it to a T20. I think Reza also said that he only took AP. Do you want to add into that as well?
Yes, in my opinion, by the way, I don't know your exact goals and as it pertains to IB, but I truly believe that there's benefits to both. And AP exams, I don't think that it's worse or less than or better. I really believe that it just is a way to quantify higher level courses, IB versus AP. So yeah, I only took AP courses. It also depends on the school. Like my school only allowed sophomores to take 2 to 4, and like freshman year, or first year, you're not allowed to take any. You could take honors classes. So it really does, I believe, and college processes look at the school specific guidelines and requirements because they know high school's requirements and what they allow to understand the rigor. So I believe looking at AP schools in California as well as IB is great. For example, I'm from California. I live in Los Angeles. Every time one of my friends or Smiley friends talked about IB, I always heard about it, but not ever usually in California. At least in LA, I never heard of this. Most of the time in LA, the best schools are AP schools. And actually, at least in my knowledge, I don't know, maybe it's shifted, but that's my experience with AP exam, especially in California, is that AP is more so, but it might be maybe in the Bay there's IB, but really I know that in LA it really is more AP, but you shouldn't take my word for knowledge. I don't know for sure.
All right, thank you so much. I think we're gonna wrap up this Q&A session.